What's up, everyone? I am just popping in here on my page to start out the Love the Thin Skin You're In free masterclass. I'm going to give people a couple minutes to kind of come in here. So when you're hopping on, just say hi. Let me know that you're here. Let me know where you're tuning in from, maybe how you heard about the masterclass. And I am just going to get this shared into my group, and we will wait for some people to hop on, and then we will get going. I have some really, really awesome content to share with you guys today. I am super excited. So bear with me, hang with me for just a minute here. And as I deal with my very slow internet. Hi, Sarah. Yay. Hi. I am just kind of getting things moving here. I'm going to share this into my group. I'm so happy you're here, Sarah. All right, guys, give me just a minute and then we will dive in. And just so you know, for those of you watching back, hi, Molly, how are you? I am going to send out a replay for this. So if you can't stay for the whole thing, you will get access to the replay. Okay, there I am. Let me just share this in my group and then we are going to get going. Yeah, I will send out the replay as soon as we are done with the masterclass. And let's see. Oh my God. Okay. You know what? Never mind. This is taking too long. I am not tech savvy, obviously. All right. I'm just going to share that later. Anyways, welcome, 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 everyone. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm really thrilled to have you guys with me live. Say hello. Let me know that you're here. And feel free, as I'm moving along through this masterclass, to let me know if you have any questions. I might not be able to answer them as they come in, but I'm definitely going to watch for them and be sure to address them at the end. So if you have any questions on anything that I am talking about, hi Alejandra, oh hi, I love you. Feel free to pop those in the comments and I will address as many as I can. So for those who don't know me, who are either, I think everybody watching right now knows me, but if anyone's watching the replay or, hopping on, for those who don't know me, my name is Amber Rochelle. Hello. I am an intuitive life coach, and I work specifically with highly sensitive women who are also empathic to help them minimize the challenges and maximize the benefits of our unique gift, so that you can feel truly empowered to thrive and really step into your purpose in this life. And so today's masterclass, as you might have seen on the sign up page, is really all about reclaiming your energy, amplifying your sensitive superpowers, and making an impact with your gifts. But to do all of this, you must first learn to love the thin skin that you are in. And so I'm going to dive into a lot of different areas of how you can start to incorporate more self-love around being a sensitive woman, and how that is going to give you all of these results of feeling more confident, of feeling more on purpose, of feeling less overwhelmed and exhausted and drained, and of feeling really, really proud of who you are as a sensitive empath woman. So a little bit about my history. And again, if you know me, you've probably heard this before, but I am like the epitome of a highly sensitive woman and an empath. And growing up for me, it was really, really challenging. I didn't know it was a thing. Nobody taught me about it. I don't think anybody in my family knew what it meant to be highly sensitive. And I just felt like I was so different than everybody else. I literally felt like I was an alien, like I just didn't belong here. It just seemed that I saw the world in such a different way than other people. But instead of, being curious about that and trying to figure out why, I, of course, just automatically assumed that was my fault and there was something wrong with me and that I was like deeply flawed. I also grew up in a household that was really, really chaotic, and there was a lot of abusive stuff going on in the family in general. Which, for a little sensitive girl, for a little sensitive anyone, is especially hard to deal with. And we do what we do, which is step in and try and be people pleasers and fix and heal and keep the peace, right? And so that was how I spent most of my childhood, was in this way of sort of trying to keep the peace and make sure that everybody was okay. Of course, they weren't, but you, as a child, you're like, I'm taking on this responsibility. And, I think a lot of us had the experience growing up of feeling like we were shamed for who we are. Because when somebody says to you, you're too sensitive, or you're too much, or you're too dramatic, or stop overreacting, you take everything too seriously, like I'm sure you guys have heard this stuff, right? When somebody says that to you, what they're doing is devaluing who you are And they're really like taking away the validity of your emotions and of your experience of the world. And that is exceptionally damaging, especially when you are a child. And I think a lot of us grew up not knowing what it meant to be highly sensitive, or not having parents that knew that, or teachers that knew that, or, you know, anyone, peers that knew that, to be able to teach us that we just see the world differently, and that's not a bad thing. And I'm going to dive into why we see the world differently in a little bit. But hi, Diana. But so, you know, for me, it really, really, really wore on my self-esteem. And I bet a lot of you can really relate to that. And so as I was growing up and getting a little bit older, you know, I felt like the way that I had to find worth was by making everybody else happy, being what I thought everybody else wanted me to be. So I was very much a chameleon. You know, I could adapt to the energy in the room. I could feel the energy in the room. And so, you know, I knew how to kind of show up to keep things as, hi, Jen, to keep things as peaceful as possible, essentially, and to hope, you know, that people would like me. And I think a lot of us, we grow up in this way where we're clinging to the shoulds, right? And this is all about societal conditioning that tells us that we should be a certain way, that we should feel things a certain way, that we should act a certain way. And so when we're, sorry, I have like a cat hair on my lip, seriously. Life with cats. It's driving me nuts. When, you know, it's so hard when you feel like you're so different from everybody else. And we want to grasp onto this control. We want to have a sense of control. We want to feel like we belong. And so, you know, like I'm sure so many of you, I became a huge perfectionist, and I was stuck in the shoulds, and I was like, what should I be doing? And in the midst of all of that, I really wasn't paying any attention to what was going on in here, what I needed, who I actually was, who I actually wanted to be, what I wanted, what my dreams were. And more specifically, you know, what my needs were in that moment. And so for me personally, you know, that ended up leading to, later down the line, a decade-long battle with anorexia and bulimia. And that's, you know, sort of an extreme of what can happen. But the bottom line is that when we grow up in this way and we're trying to hide who we are, and we feel like we're a square peg trying to pound ourselves into a circular hole, something's got to give. And whether it's that we become super depressed and anxious, or we take on a chronic illness, or whatever it is, that's going to manifest in some way. And so for me, when I finally sought treatment for my eating disorder, that is when things started to unlock for me. Because to recover from that, I had to learn to love myself. And to learn to love myself, I had to learn to accept my sensitivity and learn how to work with it and not against it. And so, you know, I went on this long journey of exploration, and I started reading self-help books when I was like 11 years old. So seeking was not new to me, but seeking for me and for my own health and my own healing was very new to me. And so I went on this journey, and this whole time I was working in corporate advertising. I used to be a graphic designer. And looking back, it's the most toxic place ever for a sensitive person, at least with my unique nature and the particular place that I was working. So I kind of had these two things going on, where I was doing all of this healing and work on myself, but then I was working in this environment that was very toxic and very draining and very exhausting and not supportive to my sensitive nature at all. And so I started to hit a wall where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, these two things cannot continue to coexist. And while I was trying to figure out what my next step is, I love telling this story because it's one of those things where you're like, oh my God, the universe just stepped in and was like, here you go. So a life coach school moved in literally across the hall from the agency that I was working at, like directly across the hall. And there's a whole long story there, but the point is, when that happened, and I ended up enrolling and getting my certification. And as I was going through coaching school, you know, me and the other girls, all of us were pretty sensitive, and we were talking about it. And this one beautiful girl, Camila, said to me, you know, I feel like sensitives are like the X-Men, because we have these powers, but we're also kind of like misfits because society doesn't understand us. But if we don't learn how to work with our power, then it can, you know, in the case of the X-Men, it can destroy you. But with us, it can emotionally destroy you and be really detrimental. And I love that analogy because I think that it's really fitting for the types of things that we deal with as highly sensitive empaths in this world. So I'm sure most of you know this, but just a little recap, because some people don't. It's becoming more widely discussed. Sensitivity is becoming much more of a buzzword. I feel like the narrative in society is starting to shift a little bit. So, people are starting to realize it doesn't equal weakness and that we're actually really gifted. But there's still a long, long way to go there. So if you don't know, or if you do, it's always a nice review. Being highly sensitive is actually a genetic trait. And so if you haven't heard of Elaine Aron, she is the psychologist that coined that term and did a lot of research on the brain and was able to find this genetic trait. And it exists in 20% of the population, pretty equally men and women, actually. A lot of people think it's just women, but it's equal. And basically what it means is that our sensory processing is different than other people. So we not only take in more information, sensory information from the world around us. So, we're picking up more things with our eyes, we're picking up more things with our ears, we're absorbing energetically and emotionally. We're really sensitive to touch. All of those things, it's amplified for us. But then once that information comes in, we also kind of churn on it a little bit deeper. So we process things longer. We need time to process things. Our brains really like to chew on stuff. So we kind of have these two things going on where we're absorbing all of this information from the world around us, feeling it at a crazy intense level, and then having like all this stuff going on in our inner world, right? So it's, if you don't know if you're highly sensitive or not, you can go to my website, amberrochelle.com, and there's a test on there that was created by Elaine Aron. But it's, you get overwhelmed easily, you're easily startled. You probably shy away from negativity or scary movies or, the news. You've probably been told through your life that you're too sensitive or too dramatic, or you take things too personally, all of that. You probably try and avoid conflict. It takes us longer to make decisions. So all of these are traits of being highly sensitive. Those are some of the ones that are a little bit more difficult to deal with, right? But it's fascinating once you start to learn about your trait, because you start to understand how our brain chemistry affects our nervous system and how we are dealing with the information that we take in. And that knowledge gives you power, right? Because the more that you know about how your brain works and how your system works, the more that you can start to manage it and work with it in a way that's going to help you feel better, rather than just being like, I don't know what's happening to me, but this feels like shit, right? Which is where I was at for so much of my life. Or there's something wrong with me, like I'm not normal, I don't function normal. You absolutely 100% function normal. It's just that it's so challenging to feel misunderstood, to be, feel like you're different. A lot of people label us as shy and introverted, and some of us are, just like some people who aren't highly sensitive are shy and introverted, but some of us aren't. It's just that that's kind of how our sensitivity presents itself. I know for me personally, I grew up as very much an introvert, but as I've grown into a woman, I've become more of an extroverted introvert. So I'm still an introvert at my core, but I have some more extroverted qualities now. So that can shift as well. You are not too sensitive. There is no such thing. You are not too dramatic. You are not too much. All of those things, once again, are societal conditioning, and that cuts deep, right? Because once again, we're being told that we're not okay as we are, but there's no such thing as too sensitive. What's the scale that we're working with? Right? This is just people's opinion and their judgment. And a lot of times when people say that stuff to us, it's more about them being triggered by the light that we shine and by the fact that we can just kind of pick up on things so naturally, than it is about them really trying to shame us. I'm not saying that excuses their behavior, and some people are obviously trying to be mean, but in general, that feedback that we're getting comes from a lack of understanding and a lack of education around the fact that there's this whole 20% of the world that has this genetic trait. So a lot of us also feel like we have to toughen up to belong, right? I'm sure you've probably heard that a lot. Like, you really need to toughen up. Like, you need to grow thicker skin. You need to let things roll off your back easier. And I don't necessarily agree. Yes, it's important to have coping skills and to be adaptive and to be resilient. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But you're not overreacting, and you don't need to toughen up. Like, literally, we have enough tough guys in this world. It's not about being tough and being strong are two very different things. Toughness is about, oh, I'm going to show up and I don't have any feelings. I don't have any needs. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm going to act like things don't bother me. And strength is I'm going to be authentic and vulnerable and deal with my emotions and ask for help when I need it and show up for people and show up for myself. Two very different things. And sensitives are strong as fuck. Seriously, you may not feel that way right now, but I'm hoping as we go through this masterclass, that's going to start to sink in. So another thing that we really struggle with is people sort of invalidate our feelings and our experience of the world, which leads us to not trust ourselves as much. Because if everybody's always telling you that you're overreacting or that you're making a big deal out of nothing, we internalize those messages and we start to tell ourselves that. We start to tell ourselves that we can't trust our own feelings, that we can't trust our own perception of our experiences and the world around us, which is a really, really hurtful way to live when you feel like not only can you not trust yourself, but there's something really wrong with you and everybody else is like, ew, why can't you be like us, right? It's a horrible way to grow up. And so oftentimes, that really leads us to shut down and to try and pretend to be something that we're not, to people please, to be doormats, to cling to the shoulds, and showing up how you think everybody wants you to show up rather than showing up as who you truly are. And then on top of that, there's the physiological and emotional overwhelm that comes from being sensitive. And nobody really teaches us how to deal with this stuff, right? If we had been taught this as children, our nervous systems wouldn't be nearly as fried. But the good news is that we can learn this stuff now and we can undo some of that damage that was done to our nervous system and help it to relax and to understand that we can trust ourselves and that the world is not that scary. I think the number one thing that most of us struggle with, you guys will probably agree, and definitely this is what I see in my clients and, was for me in the past, is just all of the feelings. Absorbing everybody's feelings, taking them on, not knowing what's yours and what isn't yours, taking on the negativity. Some of us are physical empaths, where if we're around someone that has a headache, we are taking on their headache. And I do want to address really quick that people it's really nuanced, like the difference between a highly sensitive person and an empath. And I work with women who are both. And most people that are highly sensitive are empaths and vice versa. Not always. And there's different schools of thought on this. And, take what works for you and leave the rest. This is just my own opinion around it based off my research and my work. Is that, the highly sensitive is, yes, it's our genetic trait, and highly sensitive people are very, very, very empathetic. In fact, we have a thing, so everybody has a thing in their brain called mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are there to help us have empathy, essentially. So, if I take a sip of water, your mirror neurons are going to fire as if you were taking a sip of water. So highly sensitive people have much more activation in their mirror neurons, therefore naturally giving them a more empathetic nature. Now, empaths literally absorb the feelings and energies of people around them. So it's such a fine line, but some people identify as highly sensitive and not empathic and vice versa. And again, it's totally okay. Whatever makes you feel, like you're being understood or that's something that works well for you, great. The real point is that you learn how to work with this stuff and not against it so that you can start feeling better, right? I'm just gonna look at the comments here really quick. Hi, Michelle, and make sure that I am not missing any questions. Yeah, Sarah says, if I knew I was sensitive when I was young, it would have saved me years of chronic illness. Yeah, it's literally shocking, you guys, how many women come to me as clients that suffer with chronic illness. And you start to see the connection between that and depression and anxiety and inflammation in your system and overload in your nervous system. And it's really interesting when you start to see the correlation between those things. Now, I want to preface this by saying that does not mean that it's your fault if you have a chronic illness. Of course not, God no. But there is a correlation between the way that our bodies feel and the way that we process emotions and the way that we're taking care of ourselves, obviously, and how that manifests physically. And a lot of times that is as chronic pain or chronic illness. It is very, very, very common in HSPs and chronic fatigue as well. These all kind of go hand in hand. So, okay, let's move on. Sorry, I'm just glancing at my notes. So I kind of touched on this before, but the ways that we typically try to cope before we learn to be a really empowered empath is a lot of us try to just completely shut down our sensitivity. Some people are successful at that, but in doing so, they shut down really most of who they are. Some of us tend to numb out, right? We lean on substances, whether it's food or alcohol or drugs or smoking or whatever it is, and there's no judgment here. I've done it myself. I've been there. Believe me, it's really hard when you have so many feelings and you feel misunderstood and you feel alone. And of course, we want to reach for something to numb out, right? We put ourselves last in line constantly, putting everybody else before us, hoping that if we take care of other people, then we're going to receive that worth and validation from the outside in. We often hide from the world, skipping parties, not going out as much as we want because we just don't feel like we're going to be comfortable or accepted. But the good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. And we really just need, as sensitives, to really put ourselves first and come to, whatever resource it is, whether it's me, whether it's a book, learning this stuff and really learning about your nature and learning really in depth who you are changes everything. So we just talked a lot about, why people think that being sensitive is a curse because of all of that stuff that we struggle with and deal with. But the truth is that it is actually an extreme gift. And the trouble is that we get so caught up in thinking that it's a curse for good reason, right? Because there's a lot of challenges that come with it. But that blocks us from seeing and believing in and experiencing and utilizing the actual gift that being sensitive is. Because as sensitives, we are naturally intuitive, compassionate and kind, obviously deeply empathetic, creative, visionaries, and actually we make really good leaders. And I know people always balk when I say that. But again, it's a thing about getting out of your own way. We're natural healers. Like we can instantly have soul connections with people. We just can feel at that deeper level. And it's a really, really beautiful thing, but it's hard to appreciate that when we're stuck in the chaos of all of this overwhelm. So part of this is, sorry, I just lost my place. I'm also trying to check the comments because I want to make sure I'm addressing everybody's questions. Part of this starts with reverse engineering. We basically have to unlearn the societal conditioning that's been taught to us. We have to stop fighting who we actually are, surrender to it, and then be like, okay, I need to figure out a way to make friends with this part of myself. Otherwise, I'm never going to feel really free to be truly 100% authentically myself. We have to stop looking outside of ourselves for worth and validation and figure out how to build that from the inside out. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit. Because honestly, you guys, everything you're seeking lies within. Like the process is all about, unlearning all this bullshit and all these limiting beliefs that have held you back from seeing the truth of who you really are, that have held you back from being able to experience the gift that is being sensitive, that have held you back from feeling like it's okay to speak your truth, right? To talk about your feelings, all of these things. And so we need to reclaim our sensitivity, reclaim our identity, and choose you above all else. I don't know if you guys saw my post earlier. But one of my friends, Kristen, had said the other day to me, goddesses don't chase, they choose. And I freaking love that so much. We need to step into that place where we're no longer chasing validation and worth, no longer chasing, knowing that we're good enough or that we're not too much, no longer chasing, the answers outside of ourselves, but coming back within, standing in our own power and choosing these things. So where do you begin with all of this, right? Sorry guys, I know I'm talking super fast, but I also have a lot to cover and I just want to make sure that we get to everything. So that's why, apologies for my speedy talking. So it really starts with your mindset, right? Like if you see your sensitivity as a curse, you're going to continue to experience it in that way. And so it's really important for us to be aware of our thoughts and to pay attention to what we're thinking day in and day out, especially the repetitive thoughts. Like, what are you saying to yourself about yourself? What are you saying to yourself about your sensitivity? And sometimes we don't even know because those thoughts are on autopilot and they're kind of like unconsciously running these tapes in the back of our mind. And so you'll hear me say this 100 times over, but awareness is one of your best friends. And the more that we can cultivate awareness of what's going on in here and in here, the more power we're going to have to make conscious choices and change things so that they feel better for us. So if you start to notice these patterns of negative self-talk, write them down, write them down. Start noticing like, oh God, when I first started doing this, I was like, wow, I am really mean to myself. This is unbelievable. Because really, I knew at the time, this was a long time ago, that I really didn't like myself, but I didn't actually realize how viciously mean I was speaking to myself. And it's very important to look at that. And then, a little trick that I teach to people too is to be like, if your best friend was sensitive or if she was struggling, what types of things would you say to her? Would you ever in a million years talk to your best friend the way you talk to yourself? No, right? I'm sure everybody would be like, no, unless you're already like super empowered and have beautiful, wonderful self-talk. But then the follow-up question is like, why do you deserve anything different? Why do you deserve to be treated differently than you would treat your best friend, right? And it's a really kind of pulls back the curtain on the bullshit of these limiting beliefs. And then you can start to look for, when did I start believing this? Where did this come from? And a lot of times it's something that happened when we were a child and we formed this belief. Most of our belief systems actually are formed in our brain before we are the age of 8 years old, which is super freaky if you think about it. So you have to start looking at like, who's running the show? Like, is this my inner unconscious 8-year-old? Or am I going to step in as an adult and say, no, we're stopping this right now. We're turning this train around. And when you first start to work with your self-talk and your thoughts, it can be really challenging because you're undoing years of conditioning, years of believing these things about yourself. There's a really beautiful analogy that I heard that I think explains this really perfectly. So if you think about a truck going down a dirt road and it goes down the same way every single day, ultimately those tires are going to make grooves in the dirt, right? And so the truck's just going to slide right naturally into them. Now, if one day the truck decides to take a random left, it might be a little bit of a challenge to get those tires out of those grooves. But over time, if the truck takes that left over and over and over again, it will form new grooves and automatically move to the left. This is exactly how the neural pathways work in our brain. So we can do the same thing with our thoughts, and especially our repetitive thoughts. When you hear the negative thought come up, think, is this how I want to feel about myself? Is this what I want to believe about myself? Is this serving me? What could I believe instead? What could I say to myself instead that would feel better, that would be more empowering, that would help me get from where I am to where I want to be? So once again, get in the driver's seat of your life. Be aware of who's running the show, pay attention to your thoughts, and start taking your power back over this stuff. Because I bet you a lot of things, you're going to be like, oh my God, this is something like a teacher said to me when I was like 6, or I picked this up from my parents saying this, this, and this to me. But is it actually true? Is it actually true for you today? Do you still really, really at your core believe that? And if so, is that a belief that is serving you? And how can you start to shift that? So I could talk about limiting beliefs for hours and hours, but the point is like, start with the mindset and then start looking for the positive in being a sensitive empath. Start keeping a list of like all the ways that it does serve you, how it makes you a better friend, a better creative, a better employee, how it helps you to experience not just the lows, but the highs of life so much deeper. How you're able to be such a wonderful, support person for people, just all the ways that it shows up for you in a positive way. Because the more that we start to look for the positive, the more we're going to see the positive. Exact same as if we're looking at it as a curse, we're going to continue to experience it that way. So these things take time, but they will start to shift things in you. And, a couple months down the line, you'll be like, wow, like, I can't believe how much differently I think now. I can't believe how much differently I feel now. And I've shifted all of these beliefs. And it is really, really freeing work. So the next thing that I always recommend to people is to look at your lifestyle. So unfortunately, we live in a society that's not really set up for us. It's, 80% of our society is not highly sensitive or empathic. So that's a lot of people. So they kind of run the show, right? And you guys have heard me talk about this before, our society, especially in the States, but I think this is fairly universal. We move so fast. Everything is like, be busy, be this, you got to be better. You got to have your career and have your kids and do this and do that. But you also have to be on social media all the time, being on top of your likes. And it's so unhealthy. And at the same time, there's sort of this expectation that everybody's supposed to be happy all the time, which is so beyond realistic, both with the society that we're in and in general. Like, happiness is just one part of the range of emotions that we have. Nobody is happy all the time, but we've created this space in our society where people get shamed for not feeling good, you know, or for having an emotion, or for talking about being angry. That's a big one, right? It's so taboo. Or talking about being depressed, or talking about mental illness, or talking about anxiety. And again, these things are starting to shift. But overall, there is this stigma out there about talking about your feelings, and it's so freaking unhealthy. And so we as sensitives, we need to be leaders for ourselves and also for the rest of the world to say, like, hey, like, we don't all have to jump on this busy train. You know, we don't all have to pretend like we have no feelings. Like, that's so insane. Like, we're human beings, you know? The more that we stand in our truth as sensitives, the more that we speak our feelings without apologizing, the more that we're creating that ripple effect, and changing the narrative in society and allowing other people, sensitive or not, to feel that it's more acceptable to be who they are, to ask for help, to be vulnerable, to be authentic, all these sorts of things. So we need to start creating a lifestyle for ourselves that fits our sensitivity, rather than trying to cram our sensitivity into a lifestyle that does not fit us, right? Because that's kind of the root of a lot of our issues. So what does this look like? Starts with connecting to your needs. And so you really have to start sitting down and being like, where are my needs not getting met? Where do I feel energetically depleted? Where do I feel emotionally depleted? What is it that I need? And again, this is a muscle that will take some time to get used to, of tuning in, figuring out what it is that you need. And then of course, asking for it is a whole nother thing, but we're going to get to that. But really, honestly, like, sit down and take some time and journal on this and think about like what your needs are. And needs could be anything from, you know, I need to go to yoga at least a couple times a day. I need, you know, 8 hours of sleep. I need, this much downtime, this much process time. And with the caveat of, when you're doing this, you know, you'll probably hear that voice in the back of your head that's going to be like, yeah, but. So the yeah, but voice can sit in the back seat for this exercise. This is not about like, what do I think that I could actually pull off in society? Let's put that aside for a second. This is more about like, what do I actually need? Like, if there was no limits, right? And write all of that out. And it might feel really strange and uncomfortable at first. And then look at it and be like, okay, like, how can I start making small shifts towards getting these needs met? Like, how can I start making my own rules? You know, because we really, to feel like our most optimal selves as sensitives, we really do need to make our own rules and not fall into the trap of the shoulds and let's keep up with the Joneses and let's be like everybody else, because that does not allow us to be at our fullest capacity. That is how we get depleted. And not only that, it's how we continue to feel like we're less than, because we have to adapt to this other thing, right? So, but you don't. This is all, once again, societal conditioning. You do not have to adapt to it. Is this easy? No, I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it's an overnight process, but it is so deeply empowering, and it is going to return your health to you, and your sovereignty to you, and your self-respect to you. And, you know, it's one of the most important things you can do, is really take this 360 view of your life and be like, where are my needs not getting met? And then let's see. I have so many notes to this. Okay, and this just kind of feeds into your needs getting met. So let's talk about self-care, because this also is very related to lifestyle. So first of all, self-care is not selfish. It is not. We have been, you know, like, told that, or assumed that, or created that belief system for ourselves, or picked that belief system up somewhere. But honestly, like, there's nothing selfish about taking care of yourself. Everybody deserves to be number one in their life. Everybody deserves to choose themselves first. Everybody deserves to have their oxygen tank filled first. And really, like as sensitives, I think a lot of the reason like we struggle with self-care is because we're like, I don't want to give time to myself because I find my worth and validation and my happiness in making other people happy. And okay, right? I was there for so long, and that's not necessarily that that's like, I mean, it's a beautiful intention, but we end up depleted and exhausted and overwhelmed and resentful and like a total people-pleasing doormat when we're doing that. And then when we are trying to help and serve and heal and support and be there for other people, we are nowhere near our full capacity. And oftentimes we're walking around just kind of like, okay, here I am, like I'm going to absorb all your shit, like come and get me, rather than channeling our intuition and our healing powers and, you know, all of our gift intentionally and choosing how to use it and where to put it, because that's super empowering. And from that place, you're not getting depleted or drained, but you're still able to be like, oh, I can give back to people, but in a way that I am also safe and I am also taken care of and I am also whole. So with, you know, self-care also comes back to awareness. So we have, well, in my opinion, these little like intuitive feelers, right? That are always like taking in all this information from the world around us. The issue is that we don't know naturally how to tune our intuitive feelers back to the frequency of our own soul. That just doesn't come naturally to us. That's a learned behavior. So we have to start working on that and be aware of like where, you know, like, do I want my feelers to be out here, or when is it time for me to tune them back in and listen to the voice of my soul? So one of the tips that I give to my clients is to do what I call taking your emotional pulse. So what this means is basically a couple times throughout the day, just stop whatever it is that you're doing. And I do recommend setting an alarm on your phone when you first start doing this, because otherwise you will forget. And stop what you're doing, like literally slow down, put your hand on your heart, close your eyes, because then you're shutting out the sensory, like visual sensory information. Just breathe and be like, where am I at right now? What am I feeling? Is it mine? What's been affecting me today? What am I saying to myself? What is it that I need? And then, you know, take a couple deep breaths. And this is, again, we're building the emotional muscle of being able to check in with our own frequency, check in with our own needs, check in with our own heart. And it's so important for us to do this because that's the only way that we're going to be able to know what kind of self-care we need to be doing for ourselves. The only way we're going to be able to know what we need to feel like our most optimal self every single day. And that's a really powerful question to ask yourself. What do I need to feel like my most optimal self every day? And it doesn't matter if it's different than other people. You know, it doesn't matter if you need more downtime or more rest, or, you know, you have a more sensitive diet, or like it doesn't matter. I mean, yes, okay, it can be annoying, but like it doesn't matter in that there's no judgment attached to that, right? It's us as humans that attach the judgment to these things. It's not, there's nothing wrong with you just because you have different needs in a different system. One thing that I find to be really fascinating, and I forgot to mention this earlier, is that there was a study done that this HSP trait is not just in humans, but it's in animals also. And I love this because if you think about it, the sensitive animals, the highly sensitive animals, right? They're the ones that sense danger first. They're the ones that are better at tracking down food and water. They're the ones that are, you know, protecting the pack. And in the animal kingdom, there is no judgment, right? Everybody has a role to play. So once again, it is humans that put judgment on this trait. In the animal kingdom, the HSP animals are super freaking important. And so are we. It's just changing our mindset, changing the way that we treat ourselves. So yeah, come up with a toolbox of things that make you feel really good. So for example, I'll just kind of give you a little loose idea of my self-care routine because it looks super different for everybody. But for me, I like to start in the morning because that sets the tone for the entire day. And so I have kind of a handful of things, toolbox of things that I pull from, and I don't do them all every day. Depends on how I'm feeling. But typically it's some meditation, you know, even 5 to 10 minutes is huge. Journaling is big. I'm going to talk about journaling more in a little bit. Lighting a candle. I pull oracle cards. just like letting myself sit in my own energy before I go out into the world and am sort of like around the swirl of everybody else's energies. It's that way of really sort of like honoring yourself and being like, I am going to start the day with what I need. And I am going to start the day, really putting myself first, because that's a trend that can continue throughout the day. So look at rituals and routines that support you in feeling like your best self, and then put it in your calendar. I'm not kidding. You have to prioritize this stuff because it's the number one thing that's going to slip. And I am guilty of it myself, and I coach on this stuff. I always put my self-care in my calendar. I have written down morning routine every day on my calendar. For me, I really love to cross a thing off a list, and I like to have a paper planner and write it in a paper planner. Whatever it is for you, if you need to set a reminder in your phone, if you want to put it in your digital calendar, it doesn't matter, but prioritize it. And it's going to feel really annoying at first. I mean, it might feel really, really, really good, but annoying in the sense that like, oh my God, I have to take this time to do this. And, it's hard to fit into my schedule, and I'm not seeing, sometimes, you don't see immediate results from it. Do it for 30 days and then look back and see how different you feel from when you did 30 days ago. Now, this really ties into energy protection, and this is a big one for us empaths, right? Huge, because we are sort of like natural sponges. We literally have a more porous aura to us. And when we do not know how to, kind of keep the sanctity of our own energy, we just automatically absorb everything around us. Most particularly the negative stuff, unfortunately, because those are really strong things, right? And a lot of times, people will recommend like, okay, shield yourself, like see yourself in a white light, put yourself in a bubble, visualize an energetic cloak. There's nothing wrong with those things. They can be really helpful in a pinch, but they're just a band-aid ultimately. And they keep you stuck in that victim mentality of, I need to be protected constantly. Like, I'm not safe in the world unless I'm somehow cloaked by something, right? And that's not necessarily true. So the more empowering way to do this and to feel like your energy is protected is to get in your own energy. Know your own energy inside and out. Know what it feels like when you're feeling your best and when you're feeling good. And then fill yourself up with that. Fill yourself up with your own energy, with your connection to yourself, your connection to your inner guide. This is when we are building deep roots, you guys. And when we build these deep energetic and emotional roots, then when we go out into the world, we're way less likely to be knocked around by people's like emotional and energetic storms, right? We have to do that inner work and know ourselves deeply and know our energy deeply, because then that sort of like fills your energetic bubble. And so when you go out, you don't need to be protected because you're full. You don't have those porous holes anymore. They're full of you, full of your energy, full of your happiness, full of your groundedness, full of your centeredness. And that may take a lot longer than putting yourself, imagining an energetic cloak, but it is long lasting. And it is not about having to protect yourself or being afraid to go out into the world, because I know what that feels like. It's horrible when you're like, I know if I go out, I'm going to come home and just feel like shit, right? It doesn't have to be that way. Now, that being said, I still don't love crowds and I hate malls. I despise them. I won't go in them. And that's okay, but it's not, I'm no longer not going because I'm afraid. I'm just not going because I don't like it. So, there's a difference there, right? Once again, it's about choosing, not being forced or not chasing. So this is why, another reason why self-care is so important, because if we do what I call proactive self-care rather than reactive, we're building up. It's almost like a squirrel or whatever animal, like saving nuts for the winter, right? We're building up this store of calmness, of connectedness, of groundedness, of healing our relationship with ourselves, of strengthening that relationship with ourselves, and really building that. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. I have a cold, so sorry if I'm sniffing. And I totally just forgot what I was saying. Okay, so yes, building all of that so that we have that, so that when we go out, we have that fullness. So what I mean between the difference between proactive and reactive self-care is reactive self-care That's when we're like, okay, I had a really shitty day, so I'm going to take a bath and have a glass of wine. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Great, awesome. But proactive self-care is I'm going to do this every single day because this is emotional hygiene. This is the equivalent of brushing my teeth. Like, this is what I need to be the most healthy person and to feel at my best and to take care of myself in a respectful way. So it's not just, oh, I had a bad day. It's I'm going to prepare myself and fill my tank daily and be proactive about this so that like I'm at my most emotionally and energetically healthy. If you do take on the energy of someone, and it still happens to me, you know, it's not this isn't an overnight process, and your natural inclination, your natural nature is always going to be there, but this is about learning how to manage it and work with it. So, you know, sometimes we forget, or sometimes our self-care has slipped, or sometimes we're just going through something. And so we're a little bit more like emotionally vulnerable or energetically vulnerable. And we do still pick up this stuff up from people. So when you're doing your emotional pulse tool and checking in with yourself and working on your self-awareness muscles, that is going to really accelerate this, because you'll start to notice earlier when you're picking stuff up from someone. Rather than what typically happens is we come home from a long day and we've had all these responsibilities and all these tasks and we've been out in the world, and then we come home and all of a sudden we're like this tangled energetic and emotional mess, and we don't know what's ours and what's not ours, and it just feels like crap, and then we want to numb out. Right? So if we notice things as they come up during the day, and I'm like, oh, I'm totally picking up like, you know, my friend's negativity, or, you know, so-and-so's jealousy, or like, you know, I've taken on my mom's headache, or whatever it is. When you realize it, the quicker you realize it, the quicker you can release it. So you can literally just set the intention of like, this is not mine, return to sender, but return to sender with love. Right? We're not just like, oh, take your shit back. Like, here, take all your negativity back. No, it's more like, I'm sending this back to you with love. Like, I'm going to transmute it for you and send it back to you, but I am not going to take it on and absorb it. Like, that is your responsibility. We are not responsible for other people's feelings. We feel like we are because we can feel them. But at the end of the day, if we actually tried to be responsible for all the feelings that everybody that we encountered and interacted with day in and day out, we'd be like emotionally dead. So you have to remind yourself, you are not responsible for other people's feelings. You can choose to be there for them, but you do not have to fix their world for them. So this idea of like setting the intention of like, I'm returning this to sender with love, like this is yours to deal with, like this is your lesson to learn. Right. And then also sometimes I will literally just like shake it off. Like, you know, when you feel like you got like energetically slimed, wash your hands, shake it off, go outside, get some fresh air, whatever makes you feel like you're moving that energy out of you and off of you. Another thing that is really helpful is, and I think, actually, I'm going to get into that later. Never mind. So, and then, you know, you really have to set the intention within yourself also of like, my energy is fucking precious. Like, my energy is important. And I'm not going to go out in the world with this idea that I am this victim and that everybody just gets to steal my energy and that throw all their energetic slime on me. Setting intentions is so powerful. And once again, I'm not saying this is going to fix stuff overnight, but when you can set that intention and be like, you know what? No, I'm taking this back. This is mine. You cannot have it. Just switching your mindset on that, because our inner world creates our outer world, right? This is why mindset is so powerful. This is why mindset is so important, because when we start to set these intentions, it changes our belief systems, which changes our thoughts, which changes our actions, which changes our world, right? So all of this stuff combined, and we're not even done yet, but all of this stuff combined is what really starts to make these magical transformational shifts in your life, where you can start to feel like, oh my God, like I'm still keeping all of those parts of myself that I'm proud of, that I'm empathetic and that I'm sensitive and that I'm loving and that I'm kind, but I'm not getting walked all over anymore. I don't feel like I have to be everybody's doormat anymore, right? It's really, really liberating when you get to that place. And one really important thing in getting to that place, and I still have cat hair on my face. You guys, this is what happens when you live with two cats. Just breathe it in. I love my cats. So boundaries, let's talk about boundaries, because this one is huge. Empaths and HSPs really, really struggle with setting boundaries. It's super tough because it gets at and triggers that core part of us that feels like we are responsible for taking care of everyone else and responsible for their feelings, like I was just saying. We feel like if we say no or we set a boundary, that we are somehow taking something away from someone else or hurting them or being mean to them or being selfish or unfair. But the truth is that boundaries are just self-care. That's all they are. It's self-care and self-love. It is deciding what you will and will not allow in your emotional and energetic and physical orbit through the lens of, I need to take care of myself, because if you don't take care of yourself, what is going to happen? You know, it's like we tell ourselves we're selfish for setting these boundaries, but if you set the boundaries and therefore you are more filled up, your tank is more filled up, you're going to be a lot better, you know, for helping other people than if you're just in that place where you don't have any boundaries. Boundaries are so important. They are so imperative for us to learn how to set them. And to recognize that we do not have to feel guilty about setting them, because you're not doing anything wrong. It's just going to feel uncomfortable at first if you're not used to doing it. Once again, this is like building a muscle, right? We need to practice setting these boundaries. Start with people that might feel a little bit safer. Start with boundaries that are a little bit smaller. And, you know, a good place to begin is to sit down and write down, like, where are all the places in your life that you feel walked on, violated, taken advantage of, hurt by, you know, places that don't feel good. And then start to look at, like, where have I been allowing, now this is not taking responsibility off other people being shitheads, but like, where have I been allowing people to cross these boundaries to the place where I'm getting hurt by it, where it's taking away from me? And really sit down and look at that, you know, and really think about it. Like, setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad person or a bad friend. You just have to practice communicating them. And there will be people that will get triggered and that will get mad when you set boundaries. And that's so scary to us as sensitives, because we don't like to piss people off, and we certainly don't like conflict. But once again, the more you practice, the easier it gets. And you start to realize that a lot of the people that, you know, are not accepting of or not willing to try to understand or to learn why you needed to set these boundaries are probably not people that are great for spending a lot of time with anyways. And sometimes it just takes people a little while to adapt. So when I was doing my whole kind of like self-love thing, right, after I had gotten treatment for my eating disorder and I was really working on this stuff for myself, I had to start setting some boundaries because I had been a complete doormat. And my friends, now, they're not bad people, but there's a saying, you teach people how to treat you by how you treat yourself and by what you allow. And I had taught people that it was okay to just take from me. And when I started to say, no, I can't give that much anymore, I need to set these boundaries, some of my really close friends were pissed, and it was really hard for me. But you know what? In a couple months' time, they adapted and they caught on, and they started to see how much happier I was and how much better I was feeling and why it was so important for me to set those boundaries. And then they started supporting me in those boundaries and having my back and setting some more of their own. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of time for people to adapt if they're used to you allowing them to treat you a certain way. But boundaries are going to be so important because they help you to heal your nervous system, to focus on yourself, to feel, you know, your best self, to feel like you are allowed to say no. You are allowed, like, your time, your energy, your emotional capacity, that belongs to you, but you have the choice of how you want to allow other people, you know, how much you want to give away or how much you want to allow other people to have access to those things. You get to choose that, and it's not a bad thing. You have to put your oxygen mask on first, right? And also, it's important for you as sensitives to realize that You fucking matter and you are worthy and you deserve to feel good and you deserve to have boundaries set and you deserve to take time for yourself and to make a lifestyle that fits you rather than trying to cram yourself into a box that wasn't made for you. You deserve all of this stuff. It's just that somewhere down the line, we picked up this conditioning or these ideas that we were somehow less than because we thought that, we were flawed or wrong for being such deep feelers, for having such big emotions, for being so sensitive. Well, that is bullshit. We are no different than anybody else. Everyone has their own gifts, right? I'm also not saying we're better than other people. I always like to think of it as like, if you look at people who are, naturally talented, like Molly's on here. Molly is like a brilliant mathematician. I can't do math. I mean, and it's not really my thing, right? People who are naturally good at sports, people who are natural writers, everybody has their gifts. We are just natural healers and visionaries and creatives. And we have a very, very, very high level of empathy and perception and ability to pick up on things that other people do not. So that is our gift. So it's not that we're better than other people, but it's that we have devalued ourselves for so long that we need to start standing up and supporting our sensitive sisters and brothers and being like, no, we need to take care of ourselves and then be at our most optimal self and then start educating the rest of the world that like, hey, we have so much to offer here. So it's really this process of standing in confidence and in like, this is who I am, claiming who you are, claiming your sensitivity rather than apologizing for it, because so many of us apologize for our feelings, right? We, maybe we start crying, like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm crying. Or, if we're upset one day, like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to dump all my stuff on you, or I'm sorry, I know that was too much, or I'm sorry that I asked for that, or I'm sorry I have to set this boundary, or I'm sorry I'm so sensitive. Because that is telling your brain, that's telling yourself that you're not allowed to be who you are, to ask for what you need, and to set the boundaries that you need. But it's also telling the rest of the world, like, I don't value myself. I don't value myself enough to set boundaries. I don't value myself enough to stand up for my true nature, right? So it's really important to watch not just our self-talk, but the way that we're talking about ourselves to other people as well. Words have so much power. They really, really do. And they will affect you and they will affect the way that other people treat you. And so all of this, everything that we're talking about today, guys, is about taking your power back and getting back in the driver's seat and deciding what kind of a life you want to have, and then building the belief systems and the support systems and the self-care and all the things that you need to be able to get yourself there. And it really is mostly about like moving the blocks out of the way, clearing the cobwebs, unlearning all of this conditioning, and coming back to the truth of who you are. And so that is really what I want to talk about next, is your relationship with yourself. So I think about our relationship with ourselves the way that we should think about any other relationship, right? If you think about your relationship with your best friend or your boyfriend or your partner or your mom or like whoever, right? Any relationship, we put time into it. We put energy into it. We pay attention to that person. We get to know them. We nurture that relationship. We show up for them. But why is it that we don't think about doing those things for us, for ourselves, to have that kind of a relationship with our own selves, to nurture our own selves, to show up for our own selves, to get to know our own selves? That is, I think, something that in general in our world is people don't really think about that, but particularly for us sensitives, because we're typically so outward focused, we don't really think about like, oh, but what about my relationship with myself? Am I being kind to myself? Am I being supportive to myself? Am I, treating myself the way that I would a best friend? And most importantly, am I listening to myself? And this is huge, because all of us have, and call it whatever you want, your inner GPS system, your intuition, the voice of your soul, your inner guide, whatever. It's that thing in you that is talking to you. But we as sensitives feel like we are stuck in the roar of the world, because it's like the volume on life is turned up all the time until we learn how to tune it down, right? But it's really hard for us to hear the whispers of our heart when we're stuck listening to the roar of the world and all of this negative crap talk in our head. And so we want to start tuning back in and listening to the softer voice from within us that's being like, hey, I'm here. I need you to listen to me. And sometimes it's coming from the place, oh my God, sorry guys. Sometimes it's coming from the place of our inner child. It's like, hey, I'm still in here. Like, I need you to parent me now. I need you to be there for me. I need you to listen to me. I need you to take care of me. And when you do this work and when you start spending more time with yourself and getting to know yourself better, the side effect, the beautiful side effect, is not only do you feel better and you're able to identify your needs better and you have more self-awareness, but your intuition amplifies so much. And that's one of our most beautiful gifts, is how intuitive we are. And the more that you know yourself and the more that you know the voice of your inner guide and the more that you trust your gut, the more that your intuition is going to amplify. The more you trust it, the more it's going to show up for you. The more you listen to it, the louder it's going to sound to you. So this is a process of, healing that relationship with yourself and really coming back to, like, where did I abandon my own needs? Where did I abandon, who I was, my dreams, like the real truth of my identity of who I am? Like, look back at like who you naturally were as a child, and then all the masks that we put on and all of the roles that we play to try and fit in and try and survive, really. But there has to come a time where we go, enough. I just want to be myself. I need to come back to myself and figure out a way to do that in a way that feels safe and empowering. And that is what this work is all about. So we also need to develop more healthy coping skills, because, like I touched on earlier, a lot of times if we don't know or we haven't been taught healthy coping skills to deal with all of the feels that we have, right, then no wonder we want to numb out. No wonder we try to stuff down our feelings, and so we really need to start coming up with a more healthy toolbox of coping skills. Oh, I'm just looking at the questions really quick. Oh, Johanna. Okay, I'm going to address that in a minute, hon. But yeah, and so this is the same thing as the self-care thing, where you can have a toolbox of things that you can pull from when you know that you need to process all the feels. And so, that could be alone time, that could be journaling, which is so good for us guys because it allows us to release. And we've got so much going on up here because we have such a busy inner world and we're chewing on the stuff that we're processing all the time. Just journaling, and journal with, one of my coaches told me this journal prompt and I love it because it's so simple but so profound. What does it feel like to be me today? This is from my coach, Emily Obey. She's amazing. We did some writing work together a while back. What does it feel like to be me today? And really just let yourself brain dump. Another thing that I recommend is I tell my clients to get a notebook or a journal that is dedicated as your worry journal. And so the way this works is that is just there for you to literally go in and be like, I hate this, this sucks, I'm stressed out about this, I'm worried about this, I feel like I can't control this, like I wish things were different in this way, like all the stuff that we see as quote unquote negative, and just dump it. Because there's a thing that happens in our brain where it feels like we put something somewhere and it will start to release and relax a little bit. This is also a process of acknowledging what we're feeling, of tapping into what we're feeling. And when we acknowledge a feeling and we listen to a feeling and we sit in it, no matter how painful it is, if we can sit with it instead of running from it or shaming ourselves from it or numbing out from it or lying to ourselves about it, when we're present and we listen to it and we thank it for its lessons, we sit in the pain, but the pain will process and dissipate so much faster. And what happens for so many of us, unfortunately, is that we don't do this. And then over the years, this pain gets built up and built up and built up and built up, right? And I call it a shit cake. It's like layer after layer after layer after layer after layer. And so we have to start learning to release all of that stuff that we've pent up and that we've pushed down over the years, to allow space to breathe, space to be you, space to grow. And when you can start to release that backlog of emotions, then you can start to deal with things as they come up. Because it doesn't feel, I used to feel like if I let myself sit in pain, or if I let myself sit in my emotion, it was going to open the floodgates and like all of this stuff was going to come rushing out. And that's petrifying. And so no wonder we keep running. But when you can process that backlog in a loving, safe, supportive space, and then learn how to deal with emotions as they come up, it just clears things and makes it so much easier, because our emotions are not here to hurt us. They're here as guideposts. They're here to show us something. They're here to point us in a certain direction. And yeah, they don't always feel good, but they really are our friends. And if we can make friends with them, it's so much easier to deal with them. It's so much easier to release them. And then we're not walking around feeling like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders all the time. So yeah, so, find things that are helpful for you for, processing emotions. So it could be journaling. It could be exercise is really good. Moving your body with the intention of like, I am letting go of this energy. I am letting go of this stuff that I've been clinging onto. I need to let go of this feeling. And Sarah says, I cried so much when I started doing this work. Years and years of shit cake. Yeah, it happens, guys. It's a legit thing. But once we get that out, don't you feel so much better, Sarah? Like once we get that out and move through that, it's just so freeing. Like you feel like the biggest weight of the world is off your shoulders. I used to feel like I was carrying around like a bag of bricks. Like that's literally emotionally how I felt constantly until I started figuring out this work. So if it's breath work, if it's meditation, if it's yoga, if it's journaling, if it's sitting by yourself, if it's talking to a friend, if it's start playing with stuff, playing with stuff. I have a list of self-care stuff that I'm happy to send to anybody who wants it. So let me know in the comments and I can send that to you. Just stuff to start trying and playing with, and then see what works for you and leave the rest, because even though we're all sensitive, we're all different. Like we have different things that we, relate to or like or feel more comfortable with. So it's about looking at not how can I numb out this emotion or run from it, but how can I work through this emotion in the most healthy and safe and loving and self-compassionate way, so that I can learn from it and it can get a move on instead of sticking around with me for years. Once again, this is all about empowerment, because you're taking back your control over your emotions. I know that so many of us have felt like we're super out of control with our emotions, or that we, or it's overwhelming. Like we just have no control. There's too much going. This is a way to start saying, no, you know what? Like, I don't have to be afraid of these anymore. Everybody's got them. It's part of who I am. I might feel things a lot deeper than other people, but I am going to figure out ways to deal with this. And it took me years to accept this. Like I was like beating my head against a brick wall, because I was like, no, if I surrender to the emotion, then all this stuff is going to come out and I'm never going to stop crying. Ever. And Johanna, I will send you the list. Actually, you guys, I'll post it in the comments after. But when I finally surrendered to it and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this work, then I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Now I can just deal with the emotions as they come up. And sometimes it's really painful still, but you're taking your power back. You're like, okay, these are my emotions. They're talking to me. My inner guide is talking to me. This is trying to tell me something. I'm going to listen. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to love on it. I'm going to love on myself. And then it's going to move. So again, takes practice. And with everything that I've been teaching you guys today, I want to remind you there's no perfect way to do this stuff. Like perfect is not a thing. It's not real. So this is not like something that we do once and it fixes everything. This is like lifelong work. This is changing our lifestyle, changing our mindset, changing our thinking patterns, right? And it becomes easier and easier because eventually you build new habits, you build new neural pathways in your brain, you build new emotional muscles, and it becomes more of your go-to than the old stuff did. But it takes time, and it also takes commitment. I'll find myself slipping every once in a while, and I just have to gently remind myself, oh, right, I feel so much better when I actually do my self-care on a daily basis. But what can happen, and what I want to caution you guys against, is don't let yourself feel like, oh, I fucked up, or I didn't do that right, or I'm not getting the results I want right now, so there must be something wrong with me. No, this is all about like curiosity, not judgment. Getting in there, figuring out what works for you, trying different things, but all through the lens of like, I am ready to choose me. I am ready to choose myself. I am ready to love myself exactly as I am. Like, done with this adapting, done with this being an emotional chameleon, done with being a doormat, done with feeling like, you're cursed with this sensitivity. Like, the opposite is there for you guys, but it starts with that choice. It starts with choosing you. It starts with making the commitment to doing this work, and it will come back to you tenfold. And it is just like, I can't even, if I look at who I was like 15 years ago and who I am now, it's not even, I don't recognize myself. And it feels so much better to go through life when you like yourself and you love yourself and you set boundaries and you take really good care of yourself. So I want to move on to purpose. And then I'm going to check in with questions again. And yeah, and I will post that self-care list. I think I have a link to it. If I don't, I'll email it to you guys, or I'll find a way to get it to you. So I want to talk about purpose because as sensitives and empaths, we really, really have this deep desire to heal and support and help. And that's why so many of us become coaches and therapists and writers and naturopaths and doctors and all of those sorts of things, because we have that natural inclination in us that, we're here to give back in a certain way. And that is so, so beautiful. And I think that part of the reason, and this is my personal philosophy, but I think that part of the reason why we sensitives are so tuned into the dark shit is because that's how we know what needs healing. That's how we know what needs help, both within ourselves and within other people and within our communities and within the world. We see it and we feel it at such a deep level that we are then moved to do something and make a change. And really, our sensitivity is a superpower. It really, really is. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of cool that we can feel other people's feelings. I mean, it might suck sometimes, but it's really kind of cool. I don't know if any of you saw Guardians of the Galaxy 2, but one of the characters was Mantis, and her superpower was she was an empath. And so it's even, showing up in movies like that, right? Like, this is our magic, guys. This is our sensitive superpower. And the reason that we, if you haven't been feeling that or haven't been experiencing that, is because all of this other stuff is blocking you from experiencing that. But the truth is that you are so strong, so powerful, and that you really possess this innate divine gift. And so when I talk about purpose work, it's really important for humans in general to feel like we're leading a meaningful life. I mentioned earlier that, nobody's supposed to be happy all the time, right? That's just not natural. That's just not how life works. Happiness is not always sustainable. Leading a meaningful life is and can be. And for us sensitives, that's really important. Our values are really important. Finding meaning is really important. Feeling like we're contributing is really important. Feeling like we have a purpose here on this earth is really important. And so all of this work, when we start to get this stuff out of the way, then it's like you can start to be like, what do I really want? Like, what are my dreams? And start paying attention to what your dreams are and tapping into what your dreams are, and maybe letting yourself dream for the first time ever, and letting yourself start to take more risks and see, what really resonates with you and what lights you up the most. And again, when I talk about purpose, you don't have to be a life coach. You don't have to be a speaker. You don't have to do anything. Purpose can be, making a difference in your community, in your family, in your home, in your workplace. Purpose can be, being the most amazing mom that you can be. Purpose can be anything, and it doesn't matter, and there's no right or wrong, and it can ebb and flow and it can evolve. But when we feel like we're on purpose, it's so powerful. And it helps us to continue to speak our truth and to stand in the authentic truth of who we are and to really shine our lights. Because as empaths and HSPs, we have such bright lights, and we really don't even have to do anything half the time to help people, but just stand there and shine and really be a mirror. And when we can move past this place of being depleted and overwhelmed and drained and resentful and exhausted and dealing with depression and anxiety and chronic illness, when we clear all of that, like, our light shines so, so bright. And there's something so satisfying and calming and just really beautiful about feeling like, I have a purpose here, and this is my purpose, and this is what I want to do with the world, and it ties into my sensitivity, because your sensitivity is the lens through which you see the world. My purpose is the work that I'm doing right now. And it took me a long time to find it. But when I did, I shifted even more, because now that I've done the inner work and I'm strong and I'm confident and I love myself, and I know how to protect my energy, and I know that I have a superpower, and all of that stuff is cleared, and I know how to deal with stuff as it comes up, so that I can clear limiting blocks as they come up, I can clear the emotions as they come up, then I can be like, what really feels good? Where do I feel the most powerful? Where do I feel the most on purpose? Where do I feel like my magic fits the best? What is it? What is the difference that I want to make in the world? What is the meaning that I want to create in my life? And this is available to all of you, because everybody has meaning. Everybody matters. Everybody has a purpose. Everybody has something to contribute to this world. And everybody deserves to feel really fucking good doing it also. So again, your inner world creates your outer world. And that's why this work is so important and powerful, because we really have to reverse engineer everything that we've been taught, the neural pathways in our brain, and teach ourselves to put ourselves first, and to come back within and really take care of ourselves and love ourselves and let ourselves be who we are, and let that not only be good enough, but let it be super badass and feel good and want to put yourself out there in whatever way feels comfortable to you. Again, when I say put yourself out there, I'm not telling you don't have to get on video and do what I'm doing if you don't want to. If you want to, awesome, right? But to feel free to be who you are and to express yourself creatively and to stand in your truth and to, put whatever you're called to do, put that work out into the world, and no longer have to feel like you're weird, or like you're flawed, or like you're an alien, or like you don't belong anywhere, or that you don't have anything to offer. Like, all of that is just lies. And the truth is that you are really powerful and beautiful and special and really fucking needed on this planet. Like, you need you and the world needs you. And really, like, when you do this work, it has a massive ripple effect, because healed people heal people. Empowered people empower people. Grounded people ground others. People who speak their truth pave the way for other people to speak their truth. And so, empowered empaths are probably some of the most powerful people on the planet. Really. And we have so much magic to offer this world. Hi, Katie. We have so much magic to offer this world, but we don't have to do it in a way where we are giving away our health and giving away our energy and giving away our emotional wellness. So let me look and see if I missed any questions here. And for those of you watching the replay, feel free to tag me if you have a question, and I will come answer it for you. I'm just scrolling through the comments. Okay, I think I got to everybody. So I just want to wrap up by saying that, like, I love all of you, and thank you for being here, and thank you for listening to me, and thank you for giving yourself the gift of listening to this wisdom. And please choose you. Choose you, and the rest will follow. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. It's the best thing you can do for the world. And so if you are looking to deepen into this work, if you are interested in taking this to the next level, to sort of up-leveling your life and really stepping into your power as a sensitive badass, I do have enrollment open for my mentorship program right now. And it's a really deeply transformational 6-month container where we do this work with a lot of one-on-one guidance from me. We have group calls. It's a beautiful community of women. And it really is, I like to kind of call it like the magic wand shortcut to this work, because of course you can do it on your own, but to be able to do it with a guide and a mentor and somebody that's walked that journey before you, and to be surrounded by other women who understand you and love you and are walking the same journey, it is the most powerful thing ever. And it is, my invitation to you that if this calls to you, I'm going to put the details of the mentorship link, the link to the details of the mentorship in the comments when I end here. And then also all this week and next week, so I'm opening up my calendar to take calls. And I really want these calls to be where we can explore how you can bring this path of the empowered empath into your life now. What are the steps that you can start taking now? What are the things that, you need to focus on the most to start getting to this place where you feel like your most optimal self? And so I'm going to put the link for you guys to sign up for those as well. It's a 30-minute call, no cost. I want to talk to you guys. I want to help you. I want you to do this work, whether it's with me or not. But remember to value yourself. Remember that you're magical. Remember that you have a superpower, and remember that you matter and you are so, so important and so, so worthy and so needed in this world. and that there's a way for you to be seen and heard and to see yourself and hear yourself and love your life and really intentionally curate a life that's going to make your soul so fucking proud. So thank you so much for being on here with me, you guys. I will be back. And again, let me know if you have any questions. You can also email me, amber@amberrochelle.com. All right. Loves you all. Talk to you soon.